Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTV World, and today's show we will be taking a look at two important stories. One is close to home, of course, with reference to the current economic situation of the country. There seems to be some good news coming in from Pakistan, especially, of course, after the agreement that has been achieved by the government with the IMF, which means that we are going to hopefully be receiving the $3 billion funding after there is an executive board meeting in July. But so far, the staff level agreement has been achieved, and there's also a standby agreement for 9 months, and this is important, of course, given the fiscal situation of Pakistan for quite some time now, and something that the country was looking forward to. This also meant that the community, especially in terms of the businesses within the country, had regained their trust with the markets, and of course this means good news internationally as well, with people reviewing their perspective as to where Pakistan is heading, and also deems well for what is going to be the future prospect regarding bilateral engagements and external debt financing. And this is especially important in terms of what the country was going through and how crucial this particular deal was for the country. So there is a lot of appreciation and congratulations coming in from the Prime Minister himself for the team with the Finance Ministry, who has worked hard over very long months negotiating with the IMF in this regard. Of course, there are still challenges that lie ahead, but we know that at least for today, there seems to be a great surge in the stock exchange, with the KSE 100 index gaining more than 2,400 points, and this happened by 1 p.m. earlier today. And it means that this is going to be something perhaps that the business community is looking at in a positive way. Whether it's short-lived or is going to continue is something that is still a question mark. We also know, of course, that with the IMF agreement coming through, it's going to be important to see the kind of challenges that will rise for Pakistan, especially in terms of the increase in gas and electricity prices, in a place, of course, where people are already reeling with the very huge pressures in the cost of living crisis. And of course, moving forward, what is Pakistan's future policy is going to be, not just in terms of course, moving forward with this agreement, but also in terms of large-scale and fundamental policies in the direction which the country needs to be taken in, especially keeping in mind the political situation and the expected elections at the end of the year as well. We also, of course, know that this is an important gain given our bilateral engagements as well. And then moving forward, what is going to be the conditions and measures that the country will be taking in regarding this particular agreement. So we're going to be taking a look at, of course, the good news that is there for the country, and also keeping in mind the challenges that lie ahead, and so what needs to be done to make sure that Pakistan is able to sustain the benefits of this agreement and move forward in a positive direction. Our next segment is going to take a look at what has happened, unfortunately, in Sweden, which has been condemned by the OIC and has been spoken with reference to the international law and other collective measures that the OIC has once again reiterated on, saying that the desecration of the holy book of the Muslims is something that is unacceptable and is not in line with the international law, which is protecting religious freedom and religious harmony. And so this is something that needs to be curtailed. A lot of protests, of course, have been coming up across the Muslim countries around the world, with a lot of Middle Eastern countries also summoning their ambassadors back from Sweden. Initially, a protest application was accepted by Sweden, which has been cited as possibly having some sort of foreign policy consequences, but has been also said that this was not something that meant that the application would be rejected, keeping in mind freedom of expression. Unfortunately, we have seen that because of what had happened, the then protest was termed as an agitation, and action was taken. But what sort of consequence would that mean, especially for Sweden and its relationship with Turkey, and then of course other Muslim countries, is going to be an important decision. And the kind of action that is being stressed upon by the OIC, what really is that going to be? What can be expected from the international community to stop this and prevent such future incidents in the future? So that is going to be our discussion at the end of the show. For this and more, as always, we've been joined in the studios by senior analyst Farooq Patafi. We've also been joined online by Dr. Hakan Najib, who's a senior economist. Thank you very much, Dr. Hakan, for being a part of the discussion. And Dr. Hakan, I'll start with you. You've always been very optimistic about our negotiations with the IMF and us securing this deal, and on the very last day we did so. So what are your comments on that, and how do you feel about it? Do you think that this is a big success for the country?
Sana, good to be with you and Patafi Saab. I thought you and Patafi Saab would be offering me a souvenir today, as I've always maintained on your show. Pakistan's doctor of the last resort has to come into terms with where we stand and offer us whatever is possible so that we ride out this time period till we do our own homework and correct ourselves. Anyway, I'm glad. I think this is a better outcome than just doing the ninth review, as this will ride out the 9 months that we have in terms of this government going out, an interim setup coming in, and a new government having some time to decide how they want to take the future of Pakistan economy forward. The other thing it does very clearly is it removes the uncertainty that has been very prevalent in all the markets. It kind of gives comfort that the IMF is kind of right now for Pakistan is like a insurance against the default risk falling almost to zero for the next 9 months. We'll have some macroeconomic stability. I think our liquidity position will improve. I'm hoping a bare minimum of about $4 billion in the next month or so, or maybe 2 months. Given all this, Pakistan will have an opportunity to comfortably open its imports. At the same time, we have some shortfalls in terms of the cotton that we need for our exports, the machinery, the kind of equipment that we need to help our exporters. So I think that would come in. And the favorite of everyone in Pakistan, I've started commenting on it because everyone asks. The rupee should see both sides movement, which it should see in any case in a market-based exchange rate. So there are two things. One is the fundamentals of the rupee that kind of improve in terms of improvement in liquidity, though our productivity or our exports don't change overnight. But the second thing is that it's kind of become a value store for everyone who used to hold property or gold have started holding the dollars. So I think there will be sellers there. There'll be sellers of the export market. Even today, when one tries to get a sense, the interbank was closed, but there were more sellers than there were buyers. So you will see a bit of strength in the rupee market. The stock exchange has told you that this is something that they wanted. The international bond for Pakistan right now is trading 32% higher at 76 cents to a dollar. Compared to what it was just on 27th of June. So that market has reacted positively. They are kind of telling you that all of them, including the friendly countries, wanted you to go to the IMF. And so you have been to the IMF, and that is why I was always optimistic that in the end, this is what would be achieved. Though I will take this moment to say that I would have done it in November and not delayed it. Yes,
Right.
given all the difficulties we faced, I would have still tried to do it then. But I must commend the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the Finance Minister, and the finance team. It is a very, very difficult job to do. It is one of the hardest things to get right. Yes, it is delayed, but 4 meetings by the Prime Minister, telephone calls, and then all the midnight oil. But in the end, a good outcome for Pakistan. And let's see into the future and try and complete the new standby arrangement that Pakistan has now agreed with the IMF. That is the most important thing we need to do in the coming months.
Right. Right, absolutely. Dr. Khakan, I just also want to impress upon what you talked about achieving this back in November, because there was a lot of discussion as to what the reasons are for the delay, and many of them also pointed towards the IMF. Is this something that was possible with the governments and was in the hands of the ministry and the government back in November? This is something that Pakistan could have done and not something that was the IMF's cause back in November, and the situation would be different today?
So there were a host of factors, right? There was political instability in the country. IMF did point to that. On the technical side, we were hesitant to take such drastic measures of 170 billion in taxes, gas prices, electricity prices, then bringing the interbank and the open market so close as right now probably there is no difference. Then we were coming in with a kind of a, we did have a trust deficit with IMF, right? I mean, starting from the petrol subsidy all the way till now, we were not on the best of ground with each other. So I think that kind of did play into all this. I think the government was unsure. Maybe they were going to be there, they were not going to be there, were they going to complete the year? So everything
Okay.
kind of played in. Then, of course, this is a big coalition government. You can't take that away. But another key factor is that I've always said that we probably need a more solid team on our side. When I say solid, I don't mean there is any dearth in the bureaucracy of the administrative people who can help do the IMF stuff, but you need certain professional people who can deal on the energy side, on the expenditure, on the budgeting, on the petroleum. I think something we've done in the 13-16 program, which we completed under the same PMLN leadership, was that we kind of strengthened it with a few professionals. I think that also kind of played into the delays that did happen. All in all, it was a tough going, and that tough going did end up in delays, and that took our position to a very uncomfortable level of today at $4 billion. And here I am going to say this, that China has once again proven that in times of utmost difficulty, when you need a support to stay alive, to stay out of default, China probably proved yet again that it is that partner which can do it for you. They
Absolutely.
backstopped payments, they reprofiled, they gave us very quickly the commercial loans, so we did well with them. But I think we played all right on the economic diplomacy with the US also. I think they kind of synchronized with the IMF. Everyone kind of believed that this was not the way to leave Pakistan in the doldrums of a heightened default risk, and everything came together, though a
Right.
bit delayed, but
Right, absolutely, and I'd like
all
to
in all.
explore that a bit further as we continue the discussion. Farooq, there is of course some sort of certainty that has been achieved as for now, as Dr. Hakan was talking about, but I believe that the agreement is still subject to the board's approval. Is that something that is also certain, or do you think that any possible complications can arise?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the opportunity. Even though when Dr. Hakan Najib is on the panel, I want to listen more to him rather than to speak. He is Pakistan has been in short supply of living heroes for quite some time. And as someone who has actually steered the country's last, complete IMF program, I think that that person actually belongs to that category. So I enjoy listening to him. But just to add my 2 cents, let me actually point out that nothing is certain in this world.
Yeah.
But, when it comes to the actual bottleneck, that was the staff level agreement, because there you can be technically knocked out, right? When it comes to the board meeting, Pakistan is also, a member of IMF, and of course other countries, important countries very close to Pakistan are also there. So there's always the capacity to actually get the approval, especially when you have satisfied the technical team. But let me be very clear, Sana. This argument about regarding this being late is very clear, right? This was practically the last day of the program, outgoing program. It was like last ball on which Mia Dad might have actually gone for his sixer and actually swung the match. So I think that people who think that it is about borrowing and that's why we should not be celebrating should at least understand what Dr. Hakan Najib is saying. It is not essentially about only money. It is about the certification. For example, we might not be out of ICU yet, but we are out of the operation theater, where the doctor had actually pulled a long face and they were telling that it is 50-50. And now you're in stable condition and doctor has come to you and told you that you're going to make it. It might take some time, but you're going to make it. So that is one aspect that is very important. The second thing is regarding this being late. Now, since the whole thing has happened, there's no point for me to actually go into what exactly happened and why exactly this happened. My concern is that there are forces far more sinister at play internationally also than we might actually have originally thought. For example, one country has actually recently hosted a very important event regarding climate change and restructuring of international financial process, right, or institutions, and that is called France. And look what is happening, how it is being punished these days, right? With that kind of a situation, one would think that those who are part of the status quo would punish anybody who actually wants to alter it to make it a more equitable international order. Having said that, I think it is very important to praise the people who actually played very important role. First of all, Prime Minister of Pakistan, as Dr. Hakan Najib also said, unfortunately, there are many pundits in Pakistan. I was seeing tweet of one gentleman, I'm sure that there must be some kind of damage to the brain, that they actually end up thinking that if we are praising the Prime Minister, somehow we are trying to lobby for his future role in the next elected government as PM. But with due respect, if somebody has gone out of the way, out of their comfort zone to actually clinch a deal which is there, which is very important. Remember that these used to be the most difficult days in our elections or our electoral cycle, especially when a government is coming to a close, and then you get caretaker government which cannot make long-term decisions, and then you have a third government. The maximum damage usually was done in those days. And this time we have actually clinched a deal ensuring for 9 months that this government in its final days, the next government, that is caretaker government, and the next one will have some cushion to operate in, right? With that kind of a situation, PM, hats off to him. Army Chief of Pakistan, General Asim Munir, hats off to him, especially because now we know how much effort he actually put in, and especially when it came to SIFC also. There too his presence actually made a difference, because then everybody knows that there is going to be stability in the country and economic policies will continue. Then I want to also praise another hero in the he has found place in my pantheon of heroes, and that is the President of Sri Lanka, who was personally praised by Prime Minister because he made the meeting with the IMF MD possible. With that kind of heroes, I think, and then China, $5 billion rolled over within no time. Then Saudis, then UAE brethren as well. I think that we have had our guardian angels who have kept on helping us, and we should be glad, and we should double down and ensure that we carry on those reforms that we have committed.
Absolutely. And Dr. Hakan, that is important, especially in terms of the kind of conversations that are going on in terms of the fact that this is increasing our problems, that there is going to be, of course, a rise in electricity and gas prices, that there are a lot of challenges and conditions that the government has had to meet in order to secure this agreement. And because of that, life is going to be even more difficult for the people. And that may be so when we talk about the kind of actions that the government needs to take. But do you think that moving forward, it is possible for us to move in the direction that is going to take us away from this this unfortunate way in Pakistan of long-term government borrowings, and moving in a direction in which we can actually strengthen the system to help us in a way that we have less reliance on other countries or IMF in the future?
So a couple of very important things. One thing, again, the model of success for Pakistan is where every institution that matters puts its effort. So in this case also, for example, for the Middle Eastern money, we relied on General Asim Munir and the army's role there. If those $3 billion weren't secured, we would not have been able to fulfill the $4 or $5 billion. And then the PM went to the IDB, so that added and helped. So what I'm trying to say is that everyone's got to come together. This is the kind of the level of challenge that is there, and we see betterment because everyone did. Now, your number two. My point of view on this electricity and gas is different than what the politicians say. And you know why I say this? Look, it's not for the IMF to determine our electricity or gas price. Neither they do they determine it. It's the OGRA and the NEPRA which determine our gas prices. So when they determine our gas price or the electricity price, what the IMF is asking us for the people of Pakistan is to enact that price. Yes, there is a price rise that is coming, but the alternative to not agreeing with the IMF to enact a regulator's price, a Pakistani regulator's price of going to where Sri Lanka went. And Farooq mentioned very rightly the Sri Lankan experience. I and my wife are, kind of working with with them on these things, and they keep saying that Dr. Khakan, you got to keep the Pakistan out of this default-like situation and stay with the IMF, and that's what the message of the Prime Minister was. So again, your international friends have to also come to your help. So you have to have friends like China, which backstopped you, Sri Lanka, which helped you, and even the US, I think, which played a decently positive role in all this. So yes, the alternative is not, there is no alternative but to do what OGRA and NEPRA have asked in light of the IMF program. That's how I see this. Moving forward, I think one thing should be clear. This government, the next government, and the next government should all decide that if we even need to keep this aside from the main clogged arteries of the state and have the the SBA completed, we must do it. If something has to be done on the 30th, it must be complete on the 29th of June and sent, or 29th of July and sent to them. So that is the kind of proactive approach. Because Sana, if we were to fail this test, just imagine if somehow we were to not, there are 2 more reviews. So this is something that I'm, first time sharing on TV, that you'll get the billion, then you'll have 2 more reviews. You've had a very long time convincing of 1 review. So the game is not over. So we must put our heads and our team together to get that review done, to get the 3rd review done, so that you have all the money that is required, so that FY24 sails comfortably with the $23 billion required for Pakistan. And that's the most important thing. And then, Sana, I mean, a new government coming in, Farooq Saab, we must ask them as citizens of Pakistan, what key reforms are you going to do for us so that Pakistan looks beyond the IMF? But yet, Sana, we would have to decide on a new program with the fund as a new government comes in. So I think that's the kind of architecture.
And Dr. Hakan, I want to understand that, of course, we have these 9 months and there needs to be certain measures that Pakistan will have to take as per the agreement and what the IMF requires from us. But I want to understand what this time period, how this time period needs to be utilized by the government, much more than just what the IMF requires from us. Isn't this also the window that we have for us to move in the directions of the reforms that we keep mentioning, or the fact that there needs to be some sort of fundamental change that is required? And if that's not done in these 9 months, there's no way that we can actually then begin this after the 9 months has passed by. I just want to understand whether or not we might be a bit laid back, and we have these 9 months and at least we have this far with the IMF, and we'll think about what the rest holds after that.
So Sana, absolutely. We go to work tomorrow morning and we are going to pick up $4-5 billion in debt. Farooq Saab, this is extremely important. So we start using the SIFC and start picking up our investments in the next 6 to 8 months as well. Whether that's, divesting the LNG power plants, the Middle Eastern monies, the refinery money, and the CPEC too. So there are 3 things I think the SIFC can do. One, move on some kind of divestment, $2 to $3 billion, LNG power plants, or some other low-hanging fruit. Number 2, the CPEC 2 has to be put in motion. And number 3, Middle Eastern monies. I mean, in 2019, His Royal Highness came to Pakistan, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and he said that I want to set up a refinery in Pakistan. I mean, it is unfortunate that today I'm saying the same thing that the government is saying, inshallah, we should do a refinery. So the SIFC must take that as a first project and move on it, and it's a big project. So investment would flow in, debt would flow in, Pakistan would see some semblance in terms of the dollars that are needed. I think that's the best strategy for Pakistan, and move on some kind of structural reforms on the taxation side. Let's decide for once that we can't have the retail sector out of the tax net. We can't have the property sector paying so little. We can't have the agriculture income tax not there. We can't not have progressivity of taxation. I mean, as a country, we must decide on these things, and move on such issues. And in the 9 months, lay the groundwork so that the next government could then move on it much more quickly, because this is professional work. And I hope we can do all this.
Right, absolutely. And the role of the SIFC, Farokh, is going to be, of course, important, especially in these 9 months as well. But I again want to understand, given the fact that Pakistan will still, of course, be dealing with huge economic challenges, and we understand that the SIFC promises some sort of continuity moving forward, irrespective of whatever political or economic situation there is going to be. What will be the factors that the SIFC can actually manifest and capitalize on, so that within these 9 months and the conditions that exist, they are able to get something? Is there something that what Dr. Khan was saying as low-hanging fruit that is possibly there?
Right, Sana, let me be very clear about this, because I have actually heard a lot of things from horse's mouth, right? The people who are involved in all these issues, and I'm going to qualify that later in the program as well, but let me very quickly remind everybody who follow my articles, my reporting in the past. When I wrote or broke the news about, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, at that time in a newspaper called Don.com, right? At that time also, people were highly skeptical that any investment of that sort could come to Pakistan, because people were actually writing Pakistan off. Not only other people, but our own people who were pulling investment from the country and going to Bangladesh, other countries, right, of the sort. But then we saw that that actually started. So this time also, this SIFC is basically, what does it augur? It augurs well for huge investment in the country. And I'm not talking about $1-2 billion. I'm talking about 4 countries or 5 countries which might be able to actually, invest somewhere around $20 to $25 billion per, individually. I mean, 4 or 5, investments.
In what time frame?
Starting from now and ending up in 2030, but very soon, right? With that kind of framework and with that kind of capacity, you have to remember what exactly are our fundamentals. Let us only talk about 4 sectors that have been identified right now, right? One is agriculture. The other one is minerals, right? The third one is defense production. And the 4th one is IT. These are 4 sectors where we already are giving a lot of results. Our startups are, have passed the seed round, and they have gone to actually 1st and 2nd round, and they have been very successful in IT. Similarly, when you talk about minerals, in minerals also, I told you about only Ricodec, that the copper reserves there are not in millions of tons, billions of tons, right? That is one deposit. There are umpteen other throughout the country. Similarly, when you talk about defense production, go to our ideas summits, meetings, right, or events, and they see the interest and the way we are actually producing stuff, and that is being procured. These are not small things. Agriculture. The entire world is suffering because of a war that is going on in Ukraine and umpteen other reasons. Pakistan has a track record of having great agricultural produce. So investment in all these sectors can really look up within no time. And then on top of that, Pakistan, after the census is over, Sana, Pakistan is going to become the 4th most populous country in the world with huge population dividend, youth dividend. With that kind of a capacity, if we actually start honing this population, we can work wonders. So anybody who was actually predicting the economic demise of the country can actually now wake up, smell some coffee and realize that all this doom and gloom was because of the kind of uncertainties that we had created for ourselves. Thanks to whatever, sadly, I don't want to thank anybody for whatever happened on May 9th, but I want to say that the people who saved us from chaos on May 9th, actually they should be thanked, because that for once and for all actually ended that kind of chaos. Remember when Saudi Prince wanted to, Crown Prince wanted to come to Pakistan with that kind of investment. The next day PTI was sitting in Islamabad actually digging trenches around Islamabad and ensuring, pelting any vehicle that would come and saying that we are going to actually paralyze Islamabad. Similarly, when UAE's Prime Minister was coming here, at that time similar kind of situation was happening. So that kind of chaos is now over. And because the international market actually, when it assesses your economy, it actually wants to know where economy stands. It forgets about all the fundamentals when your economy is basically struggling against bankruptcy. If once that fear is over, Sana, we have the capacity, and I can tell you with confidence that in coming days you are going to see that the economy is going to soar, inshallah.
And that's, of course, what we're all hoping for. Dr. Hakan, of course, there was a lot of celebration today with the stock exchange and the way that the investor confidence has returned. But in terms of how this is going to be retained moving forward, how do you think that this particular gain will then be looking in the next couple of weeks or months? Is it going to be short-lived, or is it a sign that this will progressively continue? We also, of course, know that the inflation is much less than it was in May, but the policy rate still stands at 22%. How, moving forward, do you think that this is going to then increase the way that the private sector or the business community is going to move forward, especially with reference to what we need to achieve in the next couple of months?
So on the PSX, I think the market was extremely cheap. That's one thing. It was trading on price to earnings of like 2 or 3, which is unfair for Pakistan's market. The market cap had fallen to $22 billion. It used to be close to $100 billion, I think, in 2017. Really ruthlessly cheap market because it was kind of factoring in prices of a country in, uncertain default situation. And as Farooq rightly said, I mean, that uncertainty kind of for the coming weeks or months has at least that cloud cover has gone away. I think market would trade well. Values are cheap. I think we will see an upside on the market. Let's see how long it goes. But I think it is there to stay. On the inflation, I think a couple of months are still on the tough side. We have to make some administered prices of energy changes. And I'm glad that the government has kind of come clean on it and said that we need to do this. And yes, we do need to do this. Nations, but I see the supply side improving. So that would help a kind of this shortage run on the food items. I also see that the wheat crop and the cotton crop looking much better next year. So as we move into the next few months, if we stay on track with the IMF, if the monies keep flowing in, some exports would also pick up. So I'm hoping this large scale manufacturing, which is kind of contracted over the last few months or more than few months, would start to at least regain shape. That's the kind of overall scenario. But I must end with one caution. Moody's and Fitch have both shown skepticism on our capability to complete this review. Yeah. The next one and the third one. Look, having done that program and seen so many incomplete programs, we must take this extremely seriously.
Right, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned Moody's, because I was going to ask you next with reference to the kind of downgrading that Pakistan has recently witnessed. This, of course, is also something that we hope for in the future. And I understand that there may be skepticism with this program actually completing. But after 9 months, is that something that we can then expect if we're successfully able to achieve this, that then possibly the ratings will be different?
It could come even quicker if we were to build 2-3 months of imports cover, and we would start looking fresher than we are on investment, and the taxes are coming through, and the economy gains some kind of ground on the manufacturing side. I mean, I'll share something with you. One of the banks, I don't, in an internal note today said that the Pakistan bond, they were negative on it. Today they came neutral. So just to give you, and this this is like an investment bank, not a rating agency. So they can change their position once they come into this next review. By December, they should be looking at Pakistan again. But again, they are skeptical. How will we move on completion of the program? One has to take that very, very seriously.
Right, absolutely. Farooq, I understand that the finance minister has spoken about how there is going to be a medium-term strategy regarding the external debt financing, and this is how we're going to move forward. Yeah. But there is obviously, of course, something that we also need to look at in the long term. Does that mean that we're looking for perhaps more bilateral engagements and perhaps also more coming in from the private sector as well to help support us?
Right, Sana, 2 or 3 very important aspects. One, regarding the import cover that Dr. Saab was talking about, we are told that if this deal actually is approved by the board, Pakistan is going to get $1.1 billion within July. Then we have also heard from the Ministry of Finance that somewhere over $5 billion in inflows are also expected within the month of July. So the country's foreign currency reserves will particularly go up, and that is good news. We heard the Prime Minister and Finance Minister saying that they will end up building up to $14 to $15 billion in foreign reserves by the time they leave. So that is also good news, right? Regarding 2 things, your question is important, and I'm going to actually address that as well, because public-private partnership is very important. But I wanted to also talk about the whole idea of long-term planning and talking about stakeholders. There are 2 stakeholders that one has to actually worry about. One is pundits. In Pakistan, the political pundits somehow end up talking about economy as well. And then most of them have done nothing to understand the fundamentals of economy, right? For example, let me give you a very quick example, and it is a sad one. In this health card issue in Punjab, because especially when it came to cardiac issues, it is being reformed right now. And that is because there have been some governance issues, and there have been corruption incidents. And one understands that the government there needs to fix all these issues. But the idea, I kept on hearing pundits celebrating on television that the whole idea was bad, and the government should actually be building up good hospitals and managing them, right? If you cannot administer a good health card or health cover, how the hell are you going to control or manage good hospitals, right? The problem with our pundits is that had they been actually speaking from a socialist perspective, I would have understood that. But they don't even bother to understand what they are saying, right? The whole idea of market economy, controlling things, and then government being there as a regulator is important. And I hope in coming days that happens. But similarly, I gave you another example. While we are praising the Prime Minister for going out of his comfort zone to get this deal and to save the day, somebody might actually misread it as a political campaign to burnish his credentials or our credentials in his eyes. So this is a huge shock, a huge possible shock. These people can sully anything. The moment IMF deal came, all of a sudden they kept on saying, oh, it is going to increase inflation, it is going to damage people, and it is not good. At least stay in a lane, stick to a lane, right? Similarly, I am mortally afraid of what our courts can do. So, SIFC is great, but I wish that there was some kind of representation of the courts as well, because last time, every time investment was actually derailed, it ended up being by the action of the court. Right. Having said this, Mia Mancha actually during the Eid holidays, another gentleman, big businessman, whom I respect a lot, actually gave a series of interviews. And in that, he actually reminded us of what happened in 1990s. So the biggest issue right now, in my view, is to get rid of as many SOEs as possible, state-owned enterprises, right? And he kept on saying that there are departments in which there are people who basically do nothing and who are not required. So he actually pointed out that there is a huge potential in actually offloading or privatizing these assets and then right-sizing them or rationalizing the workforce through a golden handshake. And then he brought up the example of the golden handshake that happened in 1990s. And how did it happen? Government of Pakistan also aided the private companies that were buying those assets, and then the World Bank also helped. So you can actually create a lot of momentum by getting rid of so much waste that is going on just because it can happen. Right? If you can get rid of that in coming days, or at least restructure in a way where people, especially if you are in your 40s and you are given a golden handshake and you are given enough money to make it till your 60s, that is good enough, right? But then you are not actually creating more problems for those institutions which are failing to take off. One example is Pakistan Airways, Pakistan Airlines. It cannot take off, right? So you need some kind of solutions.
Absolutely. Dr. Hakan, very quickly, last question. With reference to, of course, what we want to hold on to, this is a very important breathing space that we got, and this is something that hopefully we'll hold on to with dear life. But given the way that Pakistan has historically dealt with the IMF, given our economic ways and measures that the governments in the past have also taken, what are the unfortunate habits that we'll need to watch out for so that we don't step into something that we don't want?
One, we must control our expenditure so that the budget stays within the framework. Number two, we must ensure that the energy subsidies don't go out of whack, because that really disturbs the liquidity position and increases the circular debt. We must stay with an exchange rate regime which works on the market, and let the market determine the exchange rate regime, at least in the 9-month duration. And lastly, we must stay the course on inflation in terms of the monetary tightening, though many of my friends want to emphasize the cost push inflation, but inflation is a monetary phenomenon, and the way IMF models it, they think of it like that. And the two price rises that are in the offing, we must do on time, and Allah we pray to God that everything works out fine.
Absolutely. That is, of course, the hope. Thank you very much, Dr. Hakan Najib, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. We're going to very quickly also take a look at what has happened in Sweden in terms of the desecration of the Holy Book. And this is important in terms of the kind of response that was then met by the OIC and, of course, Middle Eastern countries, many of whom have also summoned their ambassadors back from Sweden. And Farouk, this is not the first time that has happened, and it's also happened in Sweden previously as well, and maybe in other parts of the world too. But there are certain conversations going on in terms of freedom of expression, and that was particularly the reason why this certain protest was then allowed, even though, of course, the desecration of the Holy Book is not something that was supported by the country. But then there's also the call for action to be taken as part of international law by the Muslim countries to respect their particular religion as well. But unfortunately, we haven't seen that actually materializing. What exactly is going to be the way forward? Of course, the summoning of ambassadors or protests is something that is a knee-jerk reaction. But in the long run, how do we prevent this from happening again?
Right, Sana, that is actually trillion-dollar question, because this is something that actually keeps on happening, and countries have their own rules, and it is very difficult to actually engage with them and to actually ensure that they come up with decisions that ensure everybody's emotions, right? or secure safety of emotions. One thing that is clear, I remember one gentleman, one Islamic intellectual, Maulana Wahiduddin, writing a book on this matter. And he actually, his book is called Shatmal Rasool Ka Masla, right? It is about blasphemy, but it can be included regarding, this episode can also be, provocations can be added. So he traces the long history of this happening in the Western world repeatedly, right? And then in India and other places, because he was an Indian. So in the end, he actually points out that first thing that you have to do is actually stay aloof from such activities, because they are designed to, provoke you. Somehow 3 or 4 things simultaneously have happened. We know in Sweden we have somebody called Geert Wilders, and people like him have been known to actually, they are Islamophobes and card carrying one at that. Similarly, there was a Muslim, American Muslim lawmaker in a state of America. She was assaulted, and similarly a Muslim was killed by police in France also. It seems that there are people who want to revive the idea of clash of civilizations, right? In that, what do you do? One argument that can be made is actually coming from Dr. Israr, the renowned intellectual, religious intellectual in Pakistan. He says that Quran that we have is an attested copy of the Quran that lies up in the skies, right? So unless you can actually harm that one, you cannot actually harm Quran. So that is one way to actually look at it. But there are others. For example, there is international understanding of Islamophobia. So OIC's role is important. We have to condemn, because regardless of whether desecration happened or not, the purpose was to hurt the emotions of Muslims. And that is there. And you have to keep on fighting through every means possible, laws, sensitization, media, and whatever possible.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farokh, for, of course, those comments. And then, of course, moving forward, this is something that we all need to understand, the respect and the sanctity of any religion, and to help support people who are being faced with such incidents and such actions that hurt their sentiments. And so this call for action is not just for Muslims, but it's for everyone. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.